Hello and welcome to the Cowboy Chronicles, the Oklahoman's Oklahoma State football podcast. I am your host, Scott Wright, joined this week by Daniel Allen of the Ocali. Daniel, thank you very much for joining me.
Scott, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. As you can tell, we are not at Stone Cloud today. Got football practice ending early today. Didn't have time to run over there and set everything up. So we're here in the Boone Pickens Stadium suites, technically.
Yeah.
Which means no Stone Cloud, no beer. Also, we couldn't find any open ones in the suites, so we're out of luck today. It's brought to you by Pepsi and Aquafina today, so we'll have to survive with that and get on down the road. Though OSU fans are probably benefiting from any alcohol consumption that they can get to get them through the days.
Whatever can get you through hard times, I'm sure that's what people are gunning for. So
exactly. All right, we'll get into, talk a little bit about kind of going back a couple of weeks since they haven't played in a while, and look ahead to the Texas Tech game. Our winner on the picks contest, what was the last game? I can't even remember. TCU?
TCU, 2 weeks ago.
It's been a while. The winner on the picks game from the TCU game, 1776 WIJ. Second time winning this year.
Oh, he's on a roll.
Wish I knew who that was, but it's been pretty easy. If you just go in there and pick the opponent, you kind of win every week. So
by multiple possessions too.
Exactly. Yeah, that usually helps. So if you want to jump in this week, jump into the comments on YouTube. Drop your score prediction for Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, which kicks off 2:30 Saturday on ESPN Plus. And as usual, you can win a Stone Cloud beer that we will drink for you on the next episode. So with that, Daniel, let's kind of go back to TCU just for a little bit, because it is pretty old at this point.
Right.
But it was hard to see that game going really any other way, I thought, than what we had with the way this season has been going for this Oklahoma State team.
Right. Obviously defense. I mean, as we've talked about, injuries to key defensive players, especially with the ones OSU has out, that always hurts. But I know we've also talked about, it seems OSU's always in the wrong place, and that never helps. And then even whenever they're in the right place, they just can't tackle well.
Right.
Then you obviously have a good passer like Josh Hoover, take advantage of a young, not very talented secondary, not very efficient for a better term. And they didn't even have to run Cam Cook that much.
Right.
I was shocked. They only ran him 7 times, and obviously TCU still ran for over 150 yards, but I think the fact that TCU only ran Cam Cook 7 times just showed how explosive their offense was.
Yeah.
That right before the end of halftime, or rather heading into the 2-minute warning, OSU had TCU 3rd and 11, I believe near their own 20, and OSU gets a stop right there. They get a touchdown. They get the ball back. They can tie it up.
Right.
TCU converts with relative ease, although the wide receiver made a pretty good catch.
Yeah.
And TCU made that 2-minute drill look really easy, a lot easier than it should be. So that was kind of the personification, if you will, in my opinion, of the whole game defensively for OSU.
Yep.
And then obviously whenever you fall behind and you turn it over twice in TCU territory, that's a momentum killer. So it kind of just snowballed from that point on.
Yeah, it did. I'd be curious to know how different the first half would have looked had OSU been able to do something on those first 2 drives. They have the fumble by Ollie Gordon, which has become a rarity, and of course interception by Alan Bowman, not as rare as Oklahoma State fans would like it to be.
Right.
So then they had a penalty that killed the next drive. They showed some ability to move the ball early in that game, and then got into the point where they just had to throw the ball all the time, and it wasn't going to happen. But I would have been curious to see what could have happened in the first half, at least, had they been able to do something with those early drives and what this offense could have looked like.
Right.
Of course, it was the offense that brought the only real positive note of the entire game, with Brennan Presley setting the all-time receptions record, surpassing Rashawn Woods, becoming the 4th player in Oklahoma State's all-time history to go over 5,000 all-purpose yards, which that list is pretty dang impressive.
Right.
In order: Thurman Thomas, Barry Sanders, Terry Miller, all 3 guys that are in the Ring of Honor right here behind us, all 3 guys that are in the College Football Hall of Fame, 2 of them that are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Fascinating to see Brennan, who I know you've covered for a while like I have.
Right.
One of the most entertaining and interesting guys that we get to talk to on a regular basis, and just a great guy to cover. Cool to see him get that kind of an honor.
Yeah, he's a humble kid. He's, obviously our job isn't to root for anybody, but whenever you see someone with that personality do well, it's fun to see. I mean, it is plain and simple. So, he's energetic. He always talks well on his teammates, and I mean, like you said, that's a pretty difficult list to become a part of. So, someone like Brennan Presley doesn't really surprise me. So,
one interesting thing, I've come around more to this idea than I was probably at the beginning of the season, but I want to get your thoughts, Daniel. Do we see Brennan Presley playing on Sundays?
Gundy's talked about it in the past. I don't see him as obviously a top 4 or 5 round guy, but kind of like guys of his stature like Tyreek Hill. I mean, they're making a living in the NFL.
Yep.
Obviously, Tyreek Hill has a lot more front on speed than Brennan Presley, but
right.
With someone with his catching ability, his ability to take contact and just get right back up and play the next down.
Yeah.
And then obviously someone of his shiftiness and grit. I mean, I think there's going to be some NFL coach that sees him and wants to take him late and sees him on the roster whenever they're making the cuts right before opening weekend and says, hey, I want that guy on the team. I want to give this kid a chance and see what he can become.
Yeah.
I do think he'll get a chance.
That's where I am too. I always said that just his straight line speed was going to be the thing that probably was his downfall at the next level, because he doesn't have that Tyreek Hill, Xavier Worthy type straightaway speed. But you factor in everything that he does, his football speed when he's on the field, the plays that he makes, and the fact that he will do anything. He'll go back there, he'll be your return guy. He'll go be your gunner on the punt team if you ask him to. He's going to be a guy that at the end of the day, and I'm stealing this line from Gundy, but at the end of the day, coaches are going to look at him and say, well, we can't cut that guy. He does too many things for our team that he can help us with. He's a guy that you could put in one of your 53-man spots and use him in a lot of different areas. I think that's going to be, I think Malcolm Rodriguez was much the same way, although he was a pretty significant contributor, particularly in that first year,
right.
And is playing a decent amount this year. But he's the same kind of guy. He's not a return man, but he's a guy that you can put on every return or on every special teams unit. They used him at fullback some last year. Right. Just a guy that you need around, those type of guys you need around. So I think that's going to be the thing that gives Brennan Presley a chance to be on a roster at the NFL level next year.
And I hate to use a cliche, but I mean he's Brennan Presley's like Malcolm, the epitome of a glue guy.
Oh, absolutely.
You need guys on your team to be successful.
Yeah.
Guys on your team like that to be successful.
Yeah,
you just
absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. So I definitely think that he's going to get a shot somewhere and have a chance to stick once he gets there. One interesting thing, and another guy that I think will definitely get a shot and probably gets drafted, Colin Oliver.
Right.
He hasn't really said anything publicly in terms of his future, but he did accept the invitation to the Senior Bowl, which is sort of the sign that he's not going to use that redshirt year and come back next year. The thing that interests me about Colin is that he's maybe not quite quick enough to be a traditional linebacker, maybe not quite big enough to be a traditional defensive end, but a guy with his speed, football skill, his pass rush ability, I think he's going to get a chance somewhere for sure. I think he's going to be a mid-round pick.
Right.
But how do you think things play out for him at the next level, because he's in danger of being a tweener, really?
Right. Yeah, I mean, not the same kind of player as Brennan, but
right.
Yeah, like Brennan, he's someone that you have to have on your team. Mm-hmm. He's that kind of a player you need on your defense. And regarding his size, his speed, NFL scouts can pinpoint what's wrong with that, and they can develop that. They do. You've seen that happen all the time. Am I saying he's going to skyrocket year one? Absolutely not. That seldom ever happens. But I think there are traits that I see in him that can be developed at the NFL level. He's someone that, like Brennan, is going to be pinpointed, and some NFL coach, GM is going to be like, I need someone like that on my team. I mean, they just are.
Yeah,
So.
I completely agree. Again, a guy that can do so many things, and it's all about fit for him. If he gets in a place that understands how they need to use him, I think he's going to have a chance to be an impactful player on some level. So it's a very interesting senior day, because there are, I guess, technically, when you include Colin Oliver, 21 guys now that are definitely done after these next two games. several more that have a year of eligibility left,
Right.
but we don't know exactly what's going to happen with those guys. You got the looming roster cut down to 105.
Yep.
All sorts of weird things that are going on right now in college football because of this, so many things like the COVID years coming together with the cut downs and everything that is looming. But I just want to talk about this senior class because it's going out with such a disappointing season
Right.
that it's really important, I think, to remember what these guys have meant to this program. And you had guys that were impact players on the 21 team that won 12 games.
Right.
A ton of guys that were impact players in 23 when they won 10. Both those teams go play for Big 12 titles. So a lot of wins, a lot of important moments that have been possible because of the guys in this senior class. And my hope is that that's how they're remembered.
Yeah, a lot of times, and the good old saying I think is quite appropriate here. You don't realize how important or beneficial something was until you don't have it anymore.
Right.
I'm not saying next year is going to be worse for OSU, but there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, and like you said, there's a multitude of key pieces from that 21 team that are going to be walking. There's a multitude of, obviously almost everyone from last year's team returned. So many guys from that team that just turned around a season that, had a lot of doom and gloom near the midway point. Offensive line, wide receivers especially, then a handful of defensive players too. It's like you said, it's a disappointing way for those seniors to go out, obviously.
Yeah.
But like you said, I think it's important for OSU fans to remember what they did, what they achieved. I don't know if a lot of people remember. To my knowledge, OSU was picked to finish middle of the pack in 21.
Mm-hmm.
They were picked to finish middle of the pack in 23, and that was kind of cool to see them overcome that and have one of the best teams in the Gundy era, and then
Right.
turn around what they had last year too. I think
Yeah.
it was pretty special. So
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of guys that are very impactful, very meaningful to this program that are going to be on their way out, playing their final game at Boone Pickens Stadium. You hope the fans recognize that, and I think a vast majority of them will. There's always a
Yeah.
few. My concern is that somebody like Alan Bowman gets booed,
Yeah.
which he does not deserve on his senior day. So hopefully guys are respected in the proper way, even
Yeah.
though this has been a very painful season for everybody involved, including the fans.
Yeah.
One thing about this class that as I was looking at the depth chart, and the depth chart is not handled week to week by the coaching staff, the one that's given to us in the media notes every week. So that you have to factor that in when you're on the outside looking in.
Right.
They're not the coaches aren't changing it based on who's practicing where, any of that. It's done by the media staff, and that's basically based off of whoever started the last game, essentially, or who has started the most games up to this point. So you have to factor that in. But the number that I looked at today, 14 guys who will be done after this season are in the top line in their position on the depth chart right now. That's just offense and defense. I guess return man would with Brennan being in both of those, you could add a couple for that. But 14 spots out of the main 22 on offense and defense. A guy who's graduating essentially is there. And Mike Gundy was asked today how he's going to balance using young guys versus letting the veterans play out the string, and he basically just said whoever gives us a chance to win the game. If you were in Gundy's shoes, how do you view that in terms of working guys to get them experience for the future, get them playing time that they maybe not have had a chance to have, versus letting a guy finish out his career playing a normal amount?
I think Scott, just given how much you're losing after this year, I think you almost have to, if you aren't already, you have to be developing toward the future. You have to be
Right.
looking toward next year. And I don't remember, it was either BYU or Baylor week. But Gundy hinted at, not that, making a 19th straight bowl game wasn't important for him, but given all they'd lost with injuries and whatnot and how the season was going at that point, obviously they had a lot better a chance to attain that bowl eligibility back then. But he pretty much hinted at it, and I'm sure you remember that, they're going to start developing toward the future. I think that's important to do right now. I think you also, like you said, you can't just give up and go 3-9. You can't. Not in today's realm of college football because it's always more appealing to win.
Right.
Recruits, high caliber recruits, under the radar recruits even, they don't like to go to teams that are losing consistently, especially a team that's lost 9 straight.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like you said, you have to find a happy medium. You have to find a way to play those veteran guys that do have experience in those situations while also looking toward next year. Because, like I said at the beginning of this sentiment, OSU is going to have a young team next year. They're going to have a really young team next year. So you have to have those guys. You have to give those guys experience in these situations to give them a chance to win, not just this year, but next year.
Right. Exactly. And it's a tricky situation because, you don't know which of those young guys have already maybe checked out a little bit or know that they're not coming back next year for whatever reason it might be, even though they're the guy that has the talent that you might want to move them into that starting job or the primary rotation for a couple of games. And then you've invested a whole lot of time and effort into somebody who's leaving. That's a tough situation to be in, but at the same time, on the other hand, you've got guys that can't come back in, like I said, 14 of those spots. And it's a tough thing to handle right now, and I don't envy Mike Gundy and the situation that he's in right now with this. A couple of things about this game in particular, and then we're going to get to the Stone Cloud 6-pack to finish things up. But obviously, as soon as you look at Texas Tech, you notice number one, great offense, top scoring offense in the Big 12, worst scoring defense in the Big 12, which makes this a little bit more intriguing just from that perspective. But Taj Brooks is just terrifying if you're Oklahoma State, based on what we've seen from this defense.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, I think he's going to be the best running back OSU's faced all year.
Yeah.
Gundy's given us a couple times, though. I think he said it about Scadaboo. I think he said it about O.J. Morton with BYU. Taj Brooks is going to be the best running back OSU's faced all season, and as you and I both know, run fence is an OSU's strong suit.
Yeah.
So, and then you obviously have a passer like Baron Morton. Texas Tech loves the RPO game a lot, like OSU. They're up tempo. OSU has gotten beat a lot this year in tempo, and teams that thrive off tempo.
Right.
So I mean, it's a nightmare matchup for OSU's defense, but at the same time, I think a dose of silver lining that fans can take from this preview is that Texas Tech, like you said, the worst scoring defense in the Big 12. They don't have a good secondary. Run defense isn't terrible, but it's not good.
Yeah.
So if OSU can establish some early momentum, preferably not turn the ball over twice in TCU territory, or in Texas Tech territory, excuse me, I think they'll have a shot. But at the same time, logistics on paper, this is a nightmare matchup for OSU, 100%.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And then and on the offensive side of the ball for Oklahoma State, that's the side where we didn't really see them go to much youth in the TCU game, where on the defensive side they were at least mixing some guys in, Powasa, Utu, guys like that were getting some extra snaps. It's a weird dynamic to have to gauge. Do you go ahead and go with your veterans that you've been investing all the practice time in, or do you try to get some young guys more involved and just see what happens? That's, I think, going to be the real trick for the Oklahoma State offense, because if they want to get Milwaukee Smith more involved at quarterback, you might be sacrificing some on your ability to go score. It's a really tough situation, I think.
Right. Yeah. A bright spot for OSU, obviously, Rodney Fields looks pretty good. Sesi Vilahi, whenever you have that mobility, you've seen him get open more. Having a dual threat quarterback, as we saw against BYU, always helps that. So I think there's some bright spots that OSU can go to offensively, but like we said, you got to find that happy medium. You don't just want to go full-on youth against a team like Texas Tech. You don't.
Right.
I don't know that it would hurt as much to do so on offense, given Tech's situation. But like we said, you got to find a happy medium to develop guys toward next year. Specifically, the prospects I just mentioned. You also got to find ways to win a game, which, going toward the experience never hurts in that situation. So
exactly. That is the perfect segue into the Stone Cloud 6-pack, which of course starts with 3 football questions and then the 3-round draft to finish everything up. So we're going to jump right into it. At quarterback for Oklahoma State, the first question in the Stone Cloud 6-pack: over or under 10 passes thrown for Milwaukee Smith?
I was debating on this one, Scott. I'm going to have to take the over. I'm not saying it's going to get out of hand for OSU, but if it does, I would think that OSU would put them in earlier than they have against Arizona State and TCU. I'd say he hits the over on passing. Like Gundy said after the Arizona State game, they gave him a lot of read plays, RPO plays, and made the right decisions on those. Obviously, he had a bad decision at the end of TCU, but outside of that, looked pretty good.
Right.
Of course, it's obviously hard to gauge in those late game situations when the game's already out of reach. So if it gets out of hand early for OSU, I wouldn't be shocked if Gundy just goes with Malawaki Smith, and the earlier the better for my pick on this one. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're going to see him in a lot of meaningful game situations this week. I'm not saying he's going to start, but I think I think we see him in the first quarter. I think we see him for a while. Honestly, I felt like setting the number at 10 was about right.
Right.
Because it could obviously go the way that we've seen the previous two games, where he only gets one series at the end of the game. But honestly, I might have even considered going over 20 if had the number been there. I think we're going to see him a lot.
The only problem I have with that one is, there's nothing like you just said the past couple of weeks that would indicate that they're going to go any different route.
Right, exactly.
So either way, I thought 10 was a good number, so I applaud you for that.
All right, very good. Moving on to number 2 in the Stone Cloud six-pack, over or under 15 carries for Ollie Gordon, and this is kind of on the opposite side because he is one of those guys that we assume is done with college football after this season. He wasn't one of the 14 that I was counting in my stat earlier. He would bring it up to 15, but he's a guy that Gundy said it today. He expects him to go to the NFL, probably a second or third round draft pick. I think at this point, based on depending on how things go in the combine. So, how much do you use him? How much do you let him protect himself for the future? So 15 is the number. Over or under 15 carries for Ollie?
I'm going to say over, solely because I think, Ollie at this point, and we've seen it a lot. Ollie's a guy that I think Gundy just lets him do what he wants to do, really. And there's been no indication that Ollie wants to opt out, wants to take a break mid-game. So, they ran him a bunch at TCU, ran him 25 times, I think. And then, obviously, when they got down by multiple scores, they ran him whenever you would be in obvious passing situations. So I think it all comes down to what Ollie wants to do, like I said, and I don't think there's any indication that Ollie's going to quit or that he wants to opt out, so I'm going to take the over on that one. I think they'll run him quite a bit against Texas Tech, to be honest.
I think he's going to be heavily involved in the game plan. Ultimately, I'm going to go under on the 15 carries. The only reason being, you do have Rodney Fields now that can go ahead and play these last two games, maintain his red shirt. We've seen what Sesi Vailahi can do. Trent Howland has looked better in recent action. So I think you're going to see a heavier rotation of those backs and take some load off of Ollie. Still have him involved because you do want him part of your offense as long as he wants to be part of it.
Right.
But I think he ends up in that 12 to 14 carry range at the end of the day. All right, we'll move on to number 3 here in the Stone Cloud six-pack. Go to the other running back on the other side of this thing that we talked about earlier, Taj Brooks. Over or under 150 yards. And I'll be honest, I considered setting this as high as 180 because this guy is really terrifying. 5'10", 230, hard to tackle, can do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Over or under 150 yards for Taj Brooks of Texas Tech.
Yeah, Scott, this is probably my easiest pick. Over. It's not even really a thought in my mind. There's been 4 times this year when a team's rushed for 300 yards as a team. There's only been twice when OSU's held a running back to under 100 rushing yards. I think, obviously with Cam Cook's situation, I think they were just having so much success in the passing game, they didn't really need to run him.
Right.
That's kind of a hard area to gauge. Has OSU improved in the run fence? No, I don't think so. I think, like I said, it's just situational. Taj Brooks, you saw DJ Giddens run all over OSU. You saw LJ Martin run all over OSU. Cam Scadaboo. I don't think, the best running back, like I said, OSU's going to face all year. I don't think that's going to be any different. So give me the over on Taj Brooks.
Same. And, okay, just for fun, if I had set it at 180, which direction would you have gone? Over?
Probably over.
Still?
Probably
All right.
over.
Yeah.
Probably over.
Probably so. Probably so. I think he could flirt with a 200-yard game. I felt the same way about Scadaboo, and then of course they ended up throwing to him so much that he ate up a bunch of his rushing yards with receiving. But still, obviously, a heck of a day for that guy that day. All right, that brings us to the draft here at the end of the Stone Cloud 6-pack. And I thought this would be interesting because we're a little bit different generationally, and there's always a reason that I pick the draft topic. I'm not going to reveal that beforehand this time, like I normally do, because it lives within one of my picks that I'm hoping to draft. Right. So we'll get to that in a minute. But our draft topic this week is most influential video games of our youth, so age 15 and younger. So you get up to high school, college age, things change.
Right.
So I'm going to your youthful age video games, and as always, the guest gets to start the draft. So Daniel, you're up with pick number 1 in our draft.
I might shock a lot of people with this pick, but Tetris. It
with
was a blueprint for a lot of video games that were developed over the course of my youth. Mm-hmm. I grew up playing Tetris with my dad all the time too.
Very nice.
I wasn't great at it, but it was addicting to play. It was.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I'm going to go with Tetris for round
1.
What
what game system were you playing Tetris on then?
My dad's GameCube, I think it was called.
Okay. Uh-huh.
People might make fun of me for not knowing what it was called, but I think it was called a GameCube. It was that Nintendo. Yeah. Right. So it was a GameCube.
Very nice.
And we played Tetris on there quite a bit growing up. So.
Very nice. Well, I'm going even farther back than the GameCube to the original Nintendo for I don't know, possibly all of my picks. We'll see how things play out. But definitely number 1, I'm going with Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, which now you see what the relevance is of the current. Did you watch the fight?
Yeah, it was a stinker.
It was
very disappointing.
Absolutely. The undercard was fantastic.
It was.
Some really good fights in that, but the match itself was yeah. Anyway, but Mike Tyson's Punch-Out was one of the most unique games that came out, I think, especially in terms of sports games.
Right.
On the original Nintendo. There were a lot of great ones, but that was there's never been a boxing game done quite like that, and I don't think you can really replicate that success. There's been some good boxing games, but nothing that took off the way that did, and it had the characters like King Hippo and Bald Bull and Soda Popinski, all these guys that were just super fun characters that you had to fight against in the game. And then of course you got to Mike Tyson, and then everybody learned the code to skip all the other fights to get to Mike Tyson, and all the things about it that were fantastic. So that's where I'm going with my first pick. It probably wasn't my number 1 favorite game, but it was definitely a top 3 for me as a kid, and I was thinking a lot about it, because I was thinking if Jake Paul had just done the bull rush to Tyson, I think he could have knocked him out in the first round.
Right. I can't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Can't disagree with that.
All right, round 2 to you, Daniel.
Probably NCAA 25, or not NCAA 25, excuse me, NCAA 14.
Okay.
It was the obviously the last.
Right, the big finale.
The finale of the previous era of college football video games, and you look at a lot of modern Madden games. It kind of set the standard for how those games were designed. Mm-hmm. A lot of later Madden games were developed in that same format, and obviously, I mean that NCAA 14 game has some things that this 25 game doesn't have. Most notably, I think, the opportunity and road to glory to play at high school. I mean, that was one of my favorite things doing. I'd get on, play in high school, try and find my high school, and which obviously in the game, I think they only based it off of cities or counties. But, I'd redesign the team and play as my high school, and then commit to a big-time SEC school. But that was always fun doing. And then the gameplay was, at the time, so far and above any other football video game. It was pretty cool to see. So it was always fun, and I'm going to have to go with NCAA 14 for
That's
that.
a fantastic choice. This was one that I thought about putting on my list. 98 was the first one for me that really pulled me into that system, and then watching the game develop over the next several years. I think probably 07 or 08 was the last time I really played it. Right. But watching how that game developed from 98 through 14 really was cool. It was absolutely fantastic. But I'm going to go back. I'm going to go with a college football game that goes back a step further, and this is one that not a lot of people played. It was not as popular. They were trying to catch on. Madden had started to become popular
Right.
at this point, and they were trying to find the college version of that. On Sega, I had Bill Walsh NCAA Football 1995.
I've never played that.
No.
I'm going to admit I've never played that.
No,
so.
no, it had a very short shelf life, but it was me and my brother were obsessed with that game when it first came out.
Right.
You know, it was kind of the precursor for what NCAA became. After that, you know, and they took it and expanded with it so much, and you know, having legit football teams on there that you
Right.
could play as, even though it didn't have player names, you could figure out who was who. They had the right numbers on guys, things like that. You know, you play the whole season and make it to a bowl game, and things that you know, that seem simple now, but back then were a really cool deal. And it was a really fun game that set the stage, I think, for what came after it.
Right.
So I was a big fan of that one. All right, last round to you, Daniel.
You know I'm a big baseball fan. I love covering
course.
college baseball. I'm going to have to go with EA College Baseball 06.
Ooh, very
The
nice.
last, and I believe it was 06 or 07. I remember that 06 was the most recent installment I have, and I'd play that all the time growing up. You know, I'd grow up going to college baseball games with my friends, with my parents, and just going home afterward and, you know, hopping on and playing as the same teams with my dad or my friends. I mean, that was so fun to do.
Yeah.
And then, you know, as a game, especially whenever it stops being produced, I think you learn to appreciate those older installment of the games because it's the last one that you have. So,
Right.
Primarily because I'm a big baseball fan, a big college baseball fan.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm going to have to go with NCAA Baseball 06. So.
Nice. You know, that was an era a genre that I felt like some of the earlier games missed out on,
Oh,
because there
100%.
wasn't a lot of college baseball games. There was a couple that they tried on Nintendo,
Right.
that they didn't do very well, and didn't take off the way that they deserved to. But yeah, it was a missed opportunity, I always thought.
And I gotta be honest. I know looking back, like nearly 20 years later, the graphics aren't great,
Right.
but they were so advanced for back then. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
they were so far and above what they should have been. They did a pretty good job capturing and illustrating and developing that game, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. All right, I've got several down for a possible last pick, but you inspired me with baseball, so I'm going to go with the game that is actually, I would say, my favorite video game of all time, and you have to factor in my age and that I didn't play a whole lot of,
Right.
you know, I had a PlayStation, I got up to PlayStation 2, but didn't play a ton. It was mostly just NCAA and Madden, and that was about the extent of my video gaming beyond the Sega. So I'm going back to RBI Baseball 2. RBI 1 is great. RBI 2 was off the charts better.
RBIT is a good one.
It was me and my brother played it for forever. We can still like recite stats of guys that were on, you know, because they had it was the 1989 baseball season where the players and the stats that were used for the teams on that edition of the game. And of course 89, me being a Cubs fan, you understand,
Right.
was a Cubs team that went and won the NL East,
Right.
lost in the playoffs, of course, had two of my favorite Cubs of all time, Ryan Sandberg and Mark Grace, and had a bunch of other really fun guys. So I was always obsessed with that year and that game, and it all just kind of married together and was the you know, the perfect game for me.
I'll tell you what, the Rhino and Mark Grace references that you just made makes me appreciate your pick even more. So, yeah.
Very nice. One Cubs fan to another.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it very much. All right. Well, with that, Daniel, thank you very much for joining me, and tell the people where they can find Ocali stuff these days.
Just go to ocali.com. You know, we're the Oklahoma State student paper obviously that covers OSU athletics. Have a pretty good crew this year. Very hardworking. Go far and beyond what a lot of other student papers do, and I feel like we're definitely up there in terms of staff and efficiency and work ethic. So, yeah, if you wouldn't mind, just go check our stuff out, ocali.com. We have stuff every day that you can check, and we'll obviously have stories from today. So, appreciate you guys listening, and Scott, as always, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man. I'll second what you said about y'all's crew. A lot of fun guys and women as well. I don't want to discount any of them.
People.
Lots of people on the staff. that do a great job and are fun to have around. It's not one of those where it's like, oh, great, the Ocala kids are here, and we all have to run to the other side of the field. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate you for watching or listening to the Cowboy Chronicles.